Nintendo is not competing in the console war. It's winning a different game entirely. While Sony and Microsoft are pushing teraflops, SSD speeds, ray tracing, and online ecosystems that mimic PCs, Nintendo sells us nostalgia, novelty, and gameplay loops that haven't changed in decades, and they somehow walk away with the crown. How is a company with underpowered hardware, a subpar online system, and questionable pricing continuing to lead the industry? That's the question, and the answer is deeply unsettling. Let's get something straight. Nintendo is not competing with Sony or Microsoft on specs alone. They never have. The Wii couldn't hold a candle to the PS3 or 360. The Switch, at launch, was already generations behind the PS4 Pro. Not to mention the Wii U. And the upcoming Switch 2, it'll probably land somewhere between the PS4 and PS5. But here's the twist. They don't need to compete, because they've convinced millions that they're not even selling technology. They're selling Nintendo. Sony sells you a platform. Microsoft sells you a service. Nintendo sells you a feeling. A perfectly engineered illusion of joy, familiarity, and ownership. And we line up for it again and again. And again. Nintendo hardware is rarely impressive. So is my diction, objectively. But it's intentionally unambitious. They build to a price point, not a performance ceiling. They aren't interested in being the best console. They're interested in being the most Nintendo console. The Switch wasn't revolutionary because of the specs, it was the form. Dock it, undock it, I have the key, can you unlock it? Seamless transitions. It was a console designed around flexibility, not fidelity. It didn't even matter that it couldn't run Red Dead Redemption 2 or 1 until recently. It ran Mario Kart and Switch Sports, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Sony and Microsoft, they're stuck in a horsepower race. Nintendo took a detour, and they stumbled upon a goldmine. Now, let's talk software. The industry is chasing realism, but Nintendo is chasing readability. Their games don't look better, but they look timeless. Pick up Breath of the Wild today, 8 years after release, and it still feels relevant. Especially if you pay $10 to play it on the Switch 2. Not because it's graphically impressive, but it knows what it is. Nintendo games avoid the uncanny valley by staying in a valley of their own making. Colorful, exaggerated, Gerudo. Other games chase the new. Nintendo games chase the forever. And because of that, they never feel obligated to offer discounts at all. That's why Mario Odyssey is still full price. That's why Smash Ultimate is still going to cost $60 in 2028. I don't know. They've trained their audience to accept that Nintendo games retain value. And yeah, well, they do, honestly. It's a psychological win for them. Here's where things get tricky, though. Nintendo's online offering is a mess. Clunky interfaces, limited voice chat, C button though. Bare bones matchmaking, and yet millions keep paying for it. Why? Because Nintendo doesn't see online as a battleground. They treat it like an optional feature, not a core pillar. Yeah. When you log on to a Nintendo console, you're not encouraged to live online. You're nudged to play a game, smile, and move on. And maybe press that C button. Compare that to the PlayStation or Xbox, where you're pinged with notifications, party invites, store promos, cloud saves, achievements. Nintendo isn't trying to keep you plugged in. They just want you to buy the next game and have fun. And despite their online services being behind the times, they remain profitable. Again, we let them cook. Here's the real strategy. Nintendo doesn't fight fair. They change the rules. They've built a vertical ecosystem. Their own hardware, their own software, their own franchises. No third-party dependence, no licensing wars. Just Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Donkey Kong, and whatever magic they decide to pull out of the vault. You know, Famicom Detective Club. I didn't play it. I know you didn't. They don't chase the customer. The customer comes to them. This is why the Switch 2 will almost certainly dominate, even if it releases expensive and underpowered and awkwardly marketed. People want only what Nintendo makes, and no one else can make it. Nintendo is a master of perceived scarcity. Yeah, they are. Remember the golden amiibo? The golden Mario amiibo? Jeez. Amiibo as a whole, really. I had to go to Italy to get like 2 amiibo. It sucked. They create artificial demand through limited releases. Whether it's 3D All-Stars, which I bought. I'm a sucker. I don't even play it. I use the soundtrack more than the games, actually. Or pre-orders that evaporate in minutes. And every time we fall for it. Every time we scramble for it. They weaponize nostalgia, too. Your childhood is not just a memory. It's a product SKU. They don't just sell games. They sell your first time beating Bowser. They sell your after-school Pokemon battles. And they know exactly how much you'll pay to relive it. That is true. Yeah. How much would you pay? You know, I'd pay so much. So much. While Nintendo leads into emotional connection, Sony and Microsoft function by focusing on functionality. Sony gives you cinematic experiences. Deep, complex, sometimes brilliant, but most of the time, you know, ask Druckmann what he thinks. Microsoft gives you access, Game Pass, xCloud, day one drops, but sometimes it costs identity. I mean,
to clarify, I said poor sign.
Look at the slot they put on.
Poor sign.
Nintendo, meanwhile, they give you a box with a mustache on it and says, have fun. And somehow, that's way more powerful than ray tracing or server farms. We do this every generation. The world keeps doubting Nintendo. They release something weird. It underwhelms on paper. Critics raise eyebrows. They lose $500 million. And then it sells out for years. The DS, laughed at. Sold 150 million. The Wii, dismissed. It outsold the PS3 and 360. The Wii U, it made Scott the Walls famous. The Switch, called an iPad with controllers. Historic success. Now, the Switch 2, underpowered again. Game prices are higher. They didn't really fix the Joy-Con drift issue. But pre-orders are flying. Streamers are talking about it for sure. And everyone's watching. Nintendo isn't just releasing a console. They're resetting the board. Here's the irony, though. Nintendo has fewer features, fewer services, and often fewer technical achievements, but more control over the market. Fun. They've created a world where they don't even need to be the very best, because they've conceived us. They've conceived us. And, you know, maybe they're the most essential. But the next time you spend $90 on a first-party game that won't drop in price, or subscribe to a bare-bones online service, or buy a slightly improved console that could have been launched in 2018, take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you making a choice, or are you playing a role in Nintendo's script? Because whether you realize it or not, they're outplaying all of us, and we keep letting them. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, consider subscribing. I've got more Switch 2 content coming, console economics, and how gaming became a brand war. I'll talk about all of that in the next one. Leave a comment. What do you think Nintendo's next move is? What do you think my next move is? Thanks for watching. Stay sharp as always, and keep it Philly.